Hello. Welcome to the Lisa Wessan Show. I'm excited to be here today with our guest, Toni Acevedo from Salem, Massachusetts and North Andover. We're going to be doing a special program on post-traumatic stress disorder today. And I'm excited to have Toni with us. So thank you for joining us, Toni.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for inviting me.
Yeah, you know, in the field of psychology, there are like 10,000 topics or more. I don't know how many. And post-traumatic stress is an anxiety disorder. And an anxiety disorder that is extreme because it's chronic, it's ongoing, it doesn't just go away by itself. And there's a nice definition. Pete, if you could bring up the slide on the definition of post-traumatic stress. You know, psychology has told us that it's happening from a horrific, terrifying, life-threatening experience that shattered your sense of safety. So basically, when someone has post-traumatic stress, it's typically, you think of veterans, but it can also be a child going through a horrific situation, abuse, incest, parents divorcing, violence, car accident, illness. So I'm going to have Toni amplify on this topic of post-traumatic stress disorder and some innovative ways to treat it. Toni, welcome.
Thank you. So PTSD for me, obviously, in the DSM-5, the post-traumatic stress disorder, it affects it can affect your entire life. It's any trauma related to physical, emotional, physical abuse, and sexual abuse as well. So it affects, again, your entire life. It's something that's, you know, if it's left untreated, it'll affect your entire life.
And that's one of the problems, are the invisible scars. And can we see that slide on invisible scars? It helps show a little bit what happens to your brain. Gets permanent damage from the high cortisol levels and the high stress. And you can treat this though, and the brain heals through repetitive, different relaxation techniques or things Toni's going to talk about now, helping us calm the brain.
I think it's really important that the approach that I use is individual, client-centered, strength-based, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and also using meditation, relaxation techniques, focusing on the breath, naming the emotions and the thoughts that are affecting them in their, when they get upset. What is the real cause of it?
Right, naming is so important. And I'm from New York City. New York City used to say, face it, trace it, and erase it.
Yeah.
Now, face it, trace it, and erase it. Erase it is very optimistic. You want to definitely get better. It's like reprogramming. It's really reprogramming. The scar tissue, I think, stays there, but you reprogram around it, and so
Yes.
a person can function, right? But also with DBT, there's tremendous reprogramming with the emotional, labeling the emotions. Tell us about labeling the emotions, because I know it's really hard. Some people just think they're happy or sad, and they don't see any variance. There are like 5,000 shades of emotions. And people often have 4, like mad, sad, glad, whatever.
Right.
And they don't know the depth of the emotions. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, it's really important for people to name using I statements, I feel, and naming the whatever it is. Like you said, it's more than 4 emotions. It's it could be jealousy, it could be ecstatic, it could be
Right.
jealous, whatever emotions,
Disgust. Disgust comes up. Disgust.
Right. It's really important to name it and to identify it and then talk about it, communicate those feelings. Because when you leave it inside and you don't share that, again, the invisible scars, it's something that is going to continue to affect your life.
Exactly. And I like to use the term defrosting the emotions. It's like some of them are frozen in there, or they're locked in. They're baked in,
Right.
And when you get in there, you defrost them or you'll cook, get them out, and then people feel that's the relief you get when you're in therapy. Basically, part of it is defrosting those uncomfortable emotions and labeling them: disgust, envy, jealousy. People hate to talk about when they're jealous. They don't want to discuss, and that's a really intense or fearful. Fearful is the obvious one.
And you know what? It really affects your family. Usually, when you work in therapy, you're working through your emotions, right? And it's usually your personal relationships, your friendships, your coworkers. Your intimate relationships, the last for you to be able to process is usually your family. That's always the last. It's the hardest. It's really hard to be able to process things with your family, and especially when your family has PTSD and they're used to not communicating their feelings. And then when you name it, it could end up being like a yelling match. It can end up a person
They
being
shut you
hurt
down.
and shut you down, and then you're left feeling vulnerable and, you know,
Oh, I understand that.
unable to kind of, you know, well, not unable, but difficult to continue in that particular moment.
And
with
that's
your
really
family.
hard when one person gets well in a family and the others are still in the family system. Talk a little bit about that, how important the family system is in treating PTSD. And do you visit with families as well?
I do. They usually the families will come into my office, and usually, you know, the identified client is usually the child. I see children and teenagers, and, you know, they process, you know, usually the behaviors, like say it's ADHD, and then there's also PTSD. There was some past abuse that the family didn't talk about, and then we process it, but usually talking about other things besides the abuse.
Right. Well, my experience has been that there's often denial. Like, you know, the child says, you know, you locked me in the closet and you beat me with a whip, you whipped me with a belt, and the buckle scratched me, you know.
Right.
And then typically the father, whoever did it, says, no, I didn't do that. Like, one lies and the other swears to it, you know, and then you got to deal with that. And I know in my office, I often tell people that, you know, honesty is going to heal people here. Feeling is healing. It's not a scary, it's scary, but it's going to help you get well. If you continue to lie or cover up, we're going to be here for a long time and no one's going to get well. Or, what do you think of that?
And I think I believe that 100%, and I think it's also important. You're role modeling as a therapist healthy relationships and communicating. As long as, you know, like I tell some of my clients, I'm here for you, I'm supporting you, but I also want you to do the work and that you can get through this. I know this is very difficult, and it's going to take time, and it's a process. So it's going to be really important. You're in it for the long haul.
Especially when you start having the no-shows, you know, like their heels are dug in. People often get resistant when the rub hits the road.
Yes.
They don't want to come anymore, and they get angry at us. They get angry, and I tell them in the first session, if you don't hate me at least once a month, I'm not doing my job. Like, I've got to get to some point where you're going to be angry that I'm asking tough questions. And they don't want those tough questions. They want to sit and like discuss a movie.
Right, exactly, or how their day went.
How do you bring them back when they go on discussing a video game or shopping at Market Basket, or they go on these tangents? How do you bring them back to the pain that they heal?
I think it depends on the relationship that you have with the client and how far along they are in treatment. If it's in the beginning, I let them talk about that because we're building rapport and a trusted relationship, clinical relationship. But then usually, you know, I'll let them talk about it and then maybe bring up something else that, you know, maybe that needs to be discussed. But again, this is their session, this is their time. Obviously, they should use it to talk about the hard stuff. But you're right, it's very difficult for people to start naming that and working through those emotions because you know it's going to be very painful and emotional.
And that's the challenge, though, you know, with all of us helping people in mental health care, not to re-traumatize them.
Right.
And yet do the work. I mean, that's one of the paradoxes. Tell us about your mentors who inspired you to get into this kind of work.
I really admire Gary Bailey and Dr. Michael Melendez from Simmons College.
We love
social work,
Simmons.
excellent. They were definitely professors that really helped me and shaped, you know, talked about racism.
Isn't that beautiful?
And different
social justice.
Social justice, and
love that.
It really made an impact in my life, and it was a pleasure to see them at the NSW symposium.
Oh, they were there this time.
Yes, and it was great to see them again.
I bet they're so proud of you. You know, I forgot to say this. Toni and I co-chair.
Yes.
That's how we met. We co-chair the National Association of Social Workers Private Practice Special Interest Group in the Northeast. And we meet in Methuen. By the way, if any of you are therapists, by the way, this is your camera, by the way.
Oh, okay.
You can look in there. If any of you are therapists watching this show and you belong to NASW, come to our meeting. We meet in Methuen the fourth Friday of the month at the library. It's a great meeting. We cover clinical, therapy, marketing, laws, policies.
Business, CMS 1500, how to
go
billing.
The 1500.
I love those.
Tony's an expert on that. You taught me how to, when I first came back to Massachusetts, how to do that damn form.
Right.
Anyway, so that's how we met. Well, I'm sure your press is very proud of you because you've come a long way.
Yes.
And also now you work with the union.
Right.
We'll get to that in a few minutes. We're going to save that for the last five. Tell me your title again of that. It's the
SEIU co-chair. Clinicians United co-chair for the executive committee.
Yes, and this is a powerful situation, and she's a powerful woman. No, we need this though, because we're not going to get into this. Is not about healthcare and insurance costs, but there are some major issues we're dealing with. And Toni's one of the advocates for all mental health practitioners, psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. All of us, clinical social workers, are affected by the laws and the breach of laws. Actually,
Yes, indeed.
what is it called? The breaking of the laws. Let's call it what it is.
The antitrust legislation.
Getting antitrust legislation. We're going to do. Actually, we're doing a show on this
okay.
next week. Toni's coming back. We're doing another show next week with somebody else in addition to explore this more fully. But anyway, so we meet. The NSW group is great. So getting back to PTSD, tell us a little bit. What's most effective when you're treating PTSD? What have you found to be super successful? And in terms of meditation, any particular favorite meditation teachers, people who you're more enamored with, like good, better, best?
I think what's really important for clients to feel that it's a trusting relationship and they can open up without feeling judged. I think it's for me. I use a more relational stance, and again using humor and always humor in my sessions. There's always laughter.
I love it. Love that. Yeah.
Because not everything should be taken too seriously, right? And being flexible.
Preaching to the choir.
Yes, all of that is very important, and focusing on less black and white thinking, all or nothing thinking, and more being flexible and looking at the gray area. Because in life, it's really important for you to see the glass half full than half empty. And if they could focus on that, I think their relationships in their lives will improve.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So.
And I'm always telling my people, there are a couple of words you should eliminate from your vocabulary. If you'll be 80% happier right away if you stop saying always and never, because those are generalizations that make you miserable. You always do this to me. You never do this. That is not true, and it makes you miserable and puts you in one of these victim heads, right? And also the word should.
Right.
I mean, he shouldn't have done this. And with PTSD, there are a lot of shoulds.
Yes.
To get my people to see that what happened to them is, it's what's done is done. And when you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time. To say, my father shouldn't have done that, my mother should have protected me. Like, well, yes, but it's happened. And how many of our clients sit there just stewing in it?
Right. Replaying it over and over
again. Talk about
again.
that, right? There's an intervention. There's many ways we intervene with this stuff, but how do you help them? If you want to give a case example and change the name and the sex, whatever, if you want to give a case example, that's always helpful, of someone who is just re-traumatizing and reliving, and it affects your work, your life, your health, your everything.
Okay.
If you can think of somebody.
Yes, I could think of someone. We'll call her Jane.
Okay.
Jane is a 39-year-old Caucasian woman, grew up in a family of 6. She was the second oldest female out of the family. Her father was bipolar, and mom was codependent. So she experienced physical and emotional abuse at a very young age, and also was very parentified and took care of her 5 siblings. Her parents weren't able to be the parents that they needed to do to raise them. So she did the parenting role and sacrificed her own childhood for her siblings.
Wow.
So she processed, and she's been in therapy with me for the past 4 years now, in 2012, and she's made a huge turnaround. Prior to her coming into seeing me, she was not able to work a full-time job. She started a business in graphic design, and that didn't work out, and so now she's been able to work part-time and is a foster parent, and have seen her emotional growth, and she's able to name emotions and not take it on as her own. Her family's stressors, whatever else is going on in the family, try not to influence her life in a negative way or have her feel like she can't continue to do what she needs to do to take care of herself.
So she's no longer being triggered by them.
Correct.
That is awesome.
Yeah, major improvement.
That's one of the goal points, is to be able to visit the family of origin that was so horrific, and if they act out, water off a duck's back, like whatever. One of the things I like to say, personally and professionally, I've learned this one. They're not doing it to me; they're just doing it. It's how they roll.
That's right.
It's their MO, modus operandi. Whether it's an ex-boss or an ex-boyfriend or parents, they're not doing it to me. This is how they treat humans. And that for me, post-traumatic stress is alleviated somewhat when you stop feeling they did it to me.
Right.
When a kid realizes no matter who was born into that family, if there's an incest survivor, they would have been incested. It wasn't about you per se.
Right.
You were in that situation. The bigger question, theologically, whatever, we don't know. Like, what is the point of all this? I'm not going to go there. This show is not geared for that right now.
It's not the individual, it's the behavior, that needs to be addressed, correct?
Right. In fact, we have a slide on that. Let's see, Pete, can we see that slide on number 4? It's not about what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you. It's a beautiful graphic. There it is. It's not about what's wrong with you, it's what happened to you.
Yes.
And it could have been any kid in that situation, or if you're in a marriage where it's really rough. Let's say you're with a domestic violence situation. Least favorite to deal with, domestic violence. Anyway, you have to remember, if you're the woman and your husband or your boyfriend's hitting on you, he'd be hitting on anybody. Mm-hmm. It's not about you. You're good. You're fine. You're perfect, just the way you are. And you could probably improve some things. The paradox is definitely the dialectic is there. But I'm saying that whole business. People come in feeling so ashamed, like it's their fault, and why they do it to,
Right, right.
So talk about that. Talk about shame busting. That's a big part of PTSD
I mean,
work.
that's huge. I really like this book, and I'm actually drawing a blank on the author, Healing the Child Within. It's a great book.
Is that John Bradshaw?
Yes.
I love John Bradshaw.
Yes.
He rocks. He was one of the early people who diagnosed this stuff.
Right. And so I think it's really important for people to, with PTSD to read that.
Yeah.
And again, it's part, naming emotions.
Let's say it slowly for our listeners. Like, look at the camera and say, John Bradshaw and...
John Bradshaw, Healing the Child Within, excellent resource book for people with diagnosed with PTSD and any anxiety disorders that maybe you're also thinking, feeling shame and guilt. It's really important.
And he captures the family work too, because he talks about how you become the identified patient when you are the survivor, and they make you feel like you're a sick one, like you're the crazy one in the family. If you've got the beat up or this incest or whatever thing you've got, a disease even, sometimes if you have some kind of an illness, you become like the sick kid, and they verbally abuse you about it. They can really mistreat you for being You're fine the way you are. You have something, whatever. So Bradshaw's really good. I don't know if he still does workshops. I used to go to his seminars in Manhattan when he first started. Before he became famous, actually, he was teaching downtown at like holistic centers. And,
what a
and
great opportunity!
His book took off. Yeah, when he was young, he was experimenting before he figured out what was going on with that family, that mobile he uses. That mobile. All right, so let's see. How are we doing on time? This is the major challenge is keeping track of our time. What have we got left? 6 minutes. 7 minutes. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Carol. You have 7 minutes. Okay. Why don't we take a moment and tell us about the union, your role, and what's going on? Give us a minute on that.
Very good. SEIU 509 Clinicians United. We are union associate members, and it's for all mental health professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, clinical social workers, LMHCs. Right.
Hold the thought a second. Pete, there's a slide. Perfect. Go ahead. Because there's your bun. That's Toni's bun, by the way.
Yes,
the table. I love that.
That's funny.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So I am the co-chair. I was elected by my members to be the co-chair for Clinicians United, and we hold meetings once a month in Watertown. We're going to be changing locations. I believe it's going to be in Marlborough. And it's really important cause where, we're all united. It's about accessibility to mental health services. And it's important for us to pass legislation, the antitrust, the clawback bill, and transparency. It's really important. We don't have anything for mental health professionals protecting us from clawbacks, and for instance.
Right, I know those clawbacks.
The insurance companies can come back
it's illegal.
4 years down the road and actually charge you, let's say, $100,000, and you're obligated to pay that amount.
I know.
They can go back.
I honestly heard of a true story of a therapist who was treating someone, whatever, and then they asked her for like $50,000 back or something.
Yeah.
From fees from 8 years ago. That has to be illegal. I know. So anyway, let's move on. So thank you. And next week we're going to come back. We're going to do a special on just the union and what it's doing for you. And to all you therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists out there, stay tuned for that one. And Frank's going to be joining us. Frank.
Yes, Frank Kashner.
Kashner's coming back. All right, finishing up. So how can we as mental health professionals help people with PTSD? We have 5 minutes. Tell us a summary of how someone can ramp up their PTSD practice Some therapists are afraid to deal with it. They don't want to deal with trauma because they feel
Right.
it's overwhelming. So any words for the therapist who's afraid to go into those murky waters?
I would say the majority of the population have PTSD. I would even
I
go
agree.
as far as that.
You can't avoid trauma.
You can't
It's trauma
avoid
city.
it.
It's trauma city.
You know, there's some parents they struggle with their own childhoods, and unfortunately it gets kind of, it's influenced in their own household.
It gets passed down
It gets
from
passed
generation.
down, right?
It's so funny you're saying that because in the Bible it says, the sins of the fathers are passed down to the next generations. And when I read that as a kid, I thought, what are they talking about? That's so bad. Like, how could you say that? But I think it's the sins, the neuroses. Read sins as neuroses. If you parents don't deal with your neuroses,
Yes.
guess what? Your kids are imprinting that. They're going to get the same stuff.
Yes.
That's why, alcoholism, they say it's genetic, but I think there's a lot of imprinting, like the mood swingy, my way, the highway, the
Right.
self-absorption, narcissism, it's all passed down to the kids. They learn that. So
So it's just going to be really important for therapists to just be, what they usually do, being empathetic, having a trusting relationship, no judgment, having them speak, naming those emotions.
Exactly, naming the
and
emotions.
feeling, for them to be able to trust you enough to share that, that's going to be key. And that's just you being, being an empathetic therapist.
that's the most important thing, the empathy and also the vision for transformation. We can hold a space where we can say, I see the wellness, you're going to be okay.
Yes.
They light up when I say, you're going to be fine, just relax, So to wrap up, you can meet Toni at her website, which is innovationcounseling.com. Thanks, Pete, for putting them on the screen, the contact information. She's based in Salem, New Hampshire.
Salem, Massachusetts.
Salem, Massachusetts. Sorry, Salem, Massachusetts. And also a little bit in North Andover.
Yes.
And I'm also in Westford, Massachusetts. Can I speak English today? I'm tongue-tied, a little nervous. Tongue-tied. Westford, Massachusetts. And we are here for you. We're going to give you our phone numbers and websites if you want to reach us to follow up any questions you may have. So thank you all for joining us. How's my time? Are we down to a minute, 2 minutes? We have 4 minutes. Oh, I'm ahead of myself today.
Wow.
Usually I'm scrambling at the end to get all this in. It's okay. So tell us about your office, Innovation Counseling in Salem, Massachusetts.
I have a private practice. I'm there 2 days a week on Wednesdays and Thursdays, and I see clients of all ages from 5 to 100. And my particular, population that I love working with is the Latino population. So I'm Spanish speaking, Puerto Rican and Dominican.
I'm jealous. Bilingual is so great.
And I just really think it's important to reach out to the Latino population. I know there's a lot of therapists in Lawrence, Mass, and that's where I was born and raised. But I wanted to help out the Latino population in Salem. That's why I was there.
Lawrence and Salem, right? It's awesome.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of special niches too with the LGBT. Talk about
Yes.
that.
GLBT population. There's no particular training in that. I'm actually considering furthering that skill set. But I really love working the GLBT population.
We need that,
as well.
I know, especially these times. More and more people are coming out and being authentic.
Right.
Like 50 years ago, there could be one person doing that and nobody coming hardly. Now it's
Right.
becoming a thing, very popular. So I'm so glad you could come today, Toni. This was great. And when you write your book, Toni's writing a book on PTSD. Once it's published, I'm going to read it, and I'll have you back, of course, discussing that further.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I really do.
Of course. And in the last minute, I'll say I'm at the Westford Center for Counseling and Holistic Therapies in Westford, Massachusetts. And I'm doing dialectical behavior therapy skills groups for women on Wednesday nights from 7:15 to 8:30. And we have openings 4 times a year where you can join us. So the next one's coming up in June. But if you're interested in dialectical behavior therapy, it's about mindfulness and interpersonal effectiveness, emotional regulation, and distress tolerance. We have 4 modules, and it's a class. It's psychoeducation. Give me a call or contact me on the website. And we're Wednesday nights at 7:15, and we have like 8 or 9 women usually. Regularly, and but the group opens up for new members a couple times a year. Love it. Love DBT. DBT is the gold standard for me for intense emotions, and it's been used for borderline and bipolar mostly, but now it's good for everybody. It should be taught, I think, in 3rd grade, like for kids. So, Lisa Wessan, thank you for joining us today. May you feel peaceful and useful in all your adventures, and we'll see you back here next time.